On it, Ray, just a second.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Give me another minute here. Got some script work I'm trying to put together. Thank you, Sammy. Okay, I see lots of pictures and lots of names on the screen. We'll call this joint work session of the Coburg Planning Commission and City Council to order at 6:01 on October 27th. Remember, this meeting is being recorded and being streamed live on YouTube and the city website. Going to ask that you please mute yourself unless you are presenting or called on to speak. I'll be trying to watch the screens as well as other people helping me to try and recognize anybody that may have questions. I've found that the best thing is motion so that I can see one of the 20 people that might want something. Otherwise, do what you can to use the icon or speak up if you need to. Muting also helps with the background noise and keeps distractions down to a minimum for all of us. Tonight's meeting is is to review the process and policies for annexation and also the zoning code changes. And again, procedure as to how this is all done. We are up to date. It's actually probably one of the simpler planning process issues as far as the Planning Commission and the council to work on, but that doesn't mean anything. It's still difficult. So, and we're going to find out what that means tonight. We'll have some information about some of the issues that we may face. So with that, I'm going to ask Ann to do a roll call, or more appropriately, probably just introduce everybody. So Ann Heath.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm Ann Heath, City Administrator. Some of you I can see, and some of you who are on the phone, I don't know who you are. So I'm going to introduce who I see, and then ask that those on the phone let us know who you are. We have Alexandra and Austin Ramirez from Lane County. Kathy, I don't know which Kathy this is. If I could see her face, that might help. Counselor Alexander, Counselor Bell, Counselor Fox, Counselor Lehman, Counselor McConnell, Damien, our city engineer, Jacob Callister from Elkhog, Jenna from Lane County. We have Ann Davies from Elkhog, our legal services, and Henry from Elkhog in planning. Lydia Dysar, Marissa Doyle, who is on Planning Commission, Patrick Weingard, and Sarah Means representing the Regional Solutions Team. And William Wood of the Planning Commission. And the rest of you who are on phones, I can't necessarily identify you. So if you don't mind introducing yourself. Or not. Oh.
Yes, hello, this is Paul Thompson, Planning Commissioner, if you can hear me.
Thank you, Paul.
Brian Harmon, City of Coburg, Public Works.
Sorry, Brian, I skipped you. Counselor Lehman, I see Counselor Lehman. Megan Winter from the City of Coburg. I wanted to thank everybody for here. I think that's here tonight. I think it's really important to recognize the support of our partners who are here tonight. Lane County Economic Development, Elkhog, and the Regional Solutions Team. I think that this is a rich asset that we continually hold in our pocket, is the regional support that we get from our partners. And so I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that you're here tonight in support of City of Coburg.
All right, thank you, Ann. I too want to recognize all the different agencies that are involved with this, and important issues for the future of Coburg, and we just have a ton of resources available to us, and I'm really grateful for that. So again, we're going to be discussing the review of policies for annexation in the City of Coburg, and also the zoning code changes, and our Public Works Director, Brian Harmon, will be providing some information on our utilities capacity and what may need to be done or not. So with that, I'm going to start off. We're going to start off with our planner, Henry Hurley, with Elkhog and City of Coburg.
Thank you, Mayor. Megan, will you please launch the PowerPoint?
Is everyone seeing it?
Now we are, yes, thank you. All right, Megan, I'll ask that you advance slides when I say so. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Henry Hurley. I'm from the Lane Council of Governments. Along with me tonight is Ann Davies, City Attorney, and also Jacob Callister, Principal Planner. Next slide, please. So tonight, we'd ask that you keep your questions, comments, and your general discussion related to annexations at a higher level. This presentation and the purpose of this meeting is not to discuss any particular property or application. It's intended to be purely informational. Our presentation will be just that. Tonight, I'll briefly describe what an annexation is, the state statutes behind them, how annexations are processed in Coburg, the noticing requirements, and what Council and Planning Commission can expect when they receive an application request for an annexation. Next slide, please. What's an annexation? Annexations are largely driven by and governed by ORS Chapter 222. Annexation is the process of changing municipal boundaries to bring adjacent unincorporated areas into an existing city. In Oregon, lands to be annexed must be contiguous with the existing city limits and within the UGB, and may be separated from city limits only by a public right-of-way, a stream, bay, lake, or other body of water. This is one of the main criteria for approval. Annexations will involve Department of Land Conservation and Development, or DLCD, and will require DLCD notice of proposed annexation at least 45 days prior to the first evidentiary hearing. With rare exceptions, annexations are required before lands can develop at urban densities or hook up to city services. Next slide, please. Background on statutes. Annexations can tend to be somewhat confusing and complex. There are several different ways to initiate an annexation that are found in ORS 222. For tonight's purpose, I'm just going to highlight the common methods for annexing in Oregon. 1. An annexation may be initiated by the legislative body of a city on its own motion. This is City Council. In this case, the annexation proposal would likely be sent to a referendum for a vote. This is often not used as a method for annexation. The second option, by the owners of real property to be annexed. This method requires consent from the property owners and not less than 50% of the electors, if any, in the territory. Now, if a single property is proposed to be annexed and there are no electors registered to vote on that property, then all you would need is consent from the owners. Coburg's charter states that annexations shall follow state law. These state law requirements for annexations are implemented locally in Article 20 of the Coburg Development Code. Next slide, please. The annexation process in Coburg. An annexation is a Type 4 process in the Development Code. Annexations are processed per Article 20, and a pre-application conference is required, as is a complete application. A Type 4 process will be heard by City Council for review and final action. An annexation will be adopted via an ordinance. Often annexations will have a concurrent zone change process applied, as the lands to be annexed are outside of the city and not under the purview of city zoning. A zone change in Coburg is a Type 3 process, which is reviewed and final action taken on by Planning Commission. The amending of the zoning map will occur via ordinance, which can only be adopted by City Council. A zone change requires a public hearing, as does an annexation, just in front of different governing bodies. Annexation agreements. An annexation agreement is a written document between the city and the property owners of the land requesting annexation. Annexation agreements should be executed prior to annexation. They should have a fixed expiration date and in general address the following issues. Utilities. The most important aspect of these agreements usually involve the issue of utilities, when they will be available and who will pay for them. For instance, if the city cannot immediately extend services to an annexed property, the agreement will specify when those services will be available or require the property owner to pay for all or a portion of the immediate extension of the services. If the landowner is to pay for the extension of the services, then the city must identify those standards that are applicable to those improvements. The city should also require that the landowner of any annexed land dedicate any and all necessary easements to accommodate the required service lines. Zoning and land use. The annexation agreement should also specify the zoning that will be applied to the newly annexed lands, as well as any other city land use regulations. Impact fees. Impact fees and other development charges, if any, should be detailed in this agreement. This may entail the acceptance of land in lieu of fees or the waiver of certain fees or charges. Other issues such as the level of police and fire protection for the annexed property after development should also be outlined. Lastly, if any annexed property presently receives utilities from another source, those services should be terminated in order for the property to begin receiving city services. Lands within the city limits should be receiving city water and sewer. This is also generally one of the main reasons why lands want to annex. Next slide, please. Noticing requirements. The notice for an annexation will include all owners and occupants of property within 300 feet of the property and active electors within the affected territory, as well as special districts and all public utility providers. Notice will also be sent to Lane County Land Management, Lane County Board of Commissioners, and Lane County elections. Notice requirements for a zone change will be the traditional 300-foot buffer from the property. Next slide, please. The responsibilities of City Council and Planning Commission. As an annexation is a type 4 process, it will go straight to City Council for public hearing and final action. The zone change can be processed concurrently but doesn't have to follow the exact timeline as the annexation request. Planning Commission will review and make a decision on the zone change. The zoning map can only be changed via an ordinance. Ordinances can only be adopted by City Council. So if the zone change is approved by Planning Commission, the ordinance authorizing the amendment of the zone change will go to City Council for final adoption. Both bodies should weigh any proposal for annexation or a zone change against the applicable criteria for approval and applicable state laws. An area should not be annexed to the city unless it has adequate city infrastructure to serve the newly annexed areas. The city should not be extending services to areas outside of city limits except on a rare or case-by-case basis. Next slide. That's all I have for the high-level annexation process in Coburg. Myself and Ann Davies are here for any questions or comments you may have. Also, Public Works and City Engineering are also on the line to answer any questions related to capacity or city services. I'll turn it back over to you, Ann. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for any of the staff or consultants mentioned? Okay, at this time, again, our Public Works Director, Brian Harmon, will discuss some of the issues with utility capacities and how they relate to future annexations. Brian.
Good evening, everybody. Megan, there's a couple slides there. Can you pull those up, please?
Sure. Would you like flow plot or loading plot first?
Well, let's go with flow because I think that's the data that will we can kind of go off of for the evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sewer capacity, and then I'm going to let Damien, the city engineer, talk a little bit about the water capacity. Over the last few weeks, we've been working with Kennedy and Jenks. Kennedy and Jenks is the designer engineer record for the treatment plant and the collection system. So what we've been looking at are a lot of effluent numbers for flow and loading. And if you want me to get into the details, I can. But the two numbers that I want you to look at are the average flow capacity, where it says 0.31, and MGD is million gallons per day. So that's 310,000 gallons. And the average annual flow for the plant right now is 164,000 gallons. So you can see just by those two numbers that flow capacity, we have plenty of capacity left at the treatment plant before that last phase which would bring in the aeration basin, the 2 extra cassettes, membrane cassettes at the treatment plant, and some blowers. So that's good news. The loading is the same way. If you could bring up the loading one. And what we did with this, we're talking about BOD. So the BOD is the one limit that we really want to pay attention to. BOD is the one that if the BOD is too high, that's the one that's harmful to fish. And we have to kind of watch that on our discharge. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Brian,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. What
Okay.
is BOD?
Biochemical oxygen demand. So basically it's the amount, it's a measurement of the amount of oxygen that's required for bacteria to degrade organics or inorganics. So if that number, and right now, if you look at the loading graph, we're talking, this is all in pounds per day. And some of it, there's one in there that says subject data point, 530 milligrams per liter. That I think we put that in there just to show you that there was an anomaly there that I'm guessing a number got transposed wrong in the calculation. Because normally we're talking about 100 parts per million, which is 100 milligrams per liter on the influent. So going out the back door of the plant, we're always less than detection limit. So that means the treatment plant is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
On the other portion, with the average flows, we were at 0.16 and the maximum is 0.31. And then you're comparing the maximum capacity or that peak hour capacity is 0.77. How does
Correct.
that peak hour capacity, I mean, how long can that run? If we hit that, is that just a one-day thing before we have to have recovery?
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if we would optimally like to run the plant that way. And there are things with our collection system that we can do to kind of mitigate those peak flows.
So when I'm looking at the couple of peaks that went above the line, what does that do to you guys in our plant? What happens with that?
Well, to be quite honest with you, not much, because the biology, it doesn't hurt. Now, if you looked at those two lines and it was happening all the time, that might be an issue. But the plant recovers really well.
Okay.
So not much as far as biology goes. We don't wash out. We don't have any die off when we talk about the aeration basin.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep this as non-detailed as I can, so everybody can kind of track with me and we don't go down a rabbit hole. That
Yeah. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I'm trying.
So we have these peaks. What happens if development occurs that is going to take us above these lines? What's the next step?
That's a great question, and I think over the course of the next few months, is Kennedy and Jinx, myself, and Branch Engineering, we kind of go through. Kennedy and Jinx right now is going to be working on an update of the facilities plan, and one of the things they're going to look at are those peak flow questions, because they are questions
But are we going to have
that need to
to,
be answered.
what do you call the two bays in the intake of the plant there? Are we going to have
The
to open that
headworks,
where the two ponds are that initially come in, the concrete, right next to the plant?
the aeration basin.
Okay, are we going to have to open those up and then put membranes in and everything, or is there?
No.
other things?
No. After speaking with Charles, I think that we're a long ways away from that, having that conversation. I think what we've found is we're way below the loading design and way below the flow design currently. So we're about half, a little bit more than half capacity.
Okay,
So that's good news. That
Yeah.
really is good news.
so you guys are going to work on some numbers that'll trigger when we're going to have to start changing
Yeah.
that. That's what you're working on coming up now, right?
Yeah, we just kind of wanted to give you a rough idea and kind of put some minds at ease.
Mhm.
I know we can't talk about the annexation, but the only property that we're talking about is close to the freeway. One of the things that we're going to be looking at is the 6-inch line that goes out to the freeway. So when we talk about capacity, it's not just at the plant, it's about
The plumbing
that
to get it
smaller
there.
line. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Damien's going to talk a little bit about the water and how we get water across the freeway, but I want to make sure that I've answered all of the wastewater questions the best I can. If anybody has any questions.
I have one, Brian, and maybe this
Yes.
is down a rabbit hole that you don't want to get down, but what I understand is EDUs. And so when I consider what we are using in EDUs now and what this graph represents of how many EDUs are available, because we know that if we add 80 homes, we're adding 80 EDUs to what we have now. And so then the rest has to serve the other side of the freeway. Do we have any idea of what that looks like for the amount of EDUs that are available to the other side of the freeway, or that is what we're trying to answer in redoing the facility plan?
So that's a great question, Ian. And I can give you I can give you two numbers, and how Charles and Damien and I correlate those numbers is probably an answer we'll get to later. But I can tell you that Sammy got us some numbers of the total build EDUs for the month of September 2020. It was 811. And our design, give me 1 second, Ann. I'm gonna hit the calculator just one more time. So we were designed for 1,066, and that was 2018. So at 2018, and again, this is best guess in 2012 for Kennedy and Jinx, but they were at 1,066 EDUs. So we're actually way below what they projected for 2018. And design in 2028 was 1,000. 85. Is that kind of answering your question, Ian?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, so it looks like if we were to bump up the residentials that are available, that we would be looking at somewhere around almost 900 EDUs. So that was my question. And then is what do
Yeah.
we have available for the other side of the freeway, which is obviously the only other place we're going to grow, because that's going to greatly influence what can be built there. And so that's
Right.
what I think is the important questions that we start answering.
Yeah. So plant capacity right now is on EDUs is 1,530.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. That does answer my question. Thank you.
And the loading is much higher on EDUs as well. So we actually have quite a bit of room there as well.
Okay. Thank you. That answers great.
Okay. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands these are really rough numbers. It took Kennedy and Jinx about 5 days to compile data. So I think we'll have better numbers. I don't think they're going to change much once we get down really and really look at the numbers. I think these are solid numbers that we can use to kind of project off of. Damien, you want to kick in anything on that?
No, he did a great job.
Okay. Does anybody have any other wastewater questions?
Hey, Brian,
just
this is
had
Paul
one.
Thompson. Oh,
Hey, Paul.
hi, Brian. So this is very similar to Ann's question, I think, but maybe from the other angle, and maybe you did answer it. Given the acreage on the east side, given that it's not zone residential, but would be a mix of non-residential uses, have you calculated or estimated a range of how much flow could be generated from that acreage once it's developed?
No.
You know, just based on industry averages for commercial industrial land or things like that, and what sort of impact that would have on the capacity?
We're trying to I just want to jump in here. We're trying to avoid any kind of direct conversation about that particular property, Paul. So that's why Brian and probably Damien aren't going to have those kind of numbers tonight. So we're trying to avoid talking about that specific property. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah.
And so I can let go of that question, understanding that. But I guess I was trying to really not focus the question on that property, but focus the question on, does the plant have capacity for lands that could be annexed, including that commercial industrial, which is much different than the residential?
I think one of the triggers that we're doing with this study right now that Brian was talking about with Kennedy Jinx, Branch Engineering and others, is what we're trying to do is figure out what number we would need, what number or EDU or however they decide to rate that, we would need to say, okay, that's it. We can't do any more. We would need further development or expansion in the plant or plumbing. And so we're kind of working at it from the west side of the freeway over to the east side instead of going from the east side, as Paul's saying, and seeing how much it would take. But we're kind of working it the other way, where we know what our numbers are, what potential we have, and where we would have to invest more in the system if a developer comes along and says, we have this many million gallons, and Brian's able to say, yeah, that's a problem. We're going to have to fix it.
I can kind of answer Paul's question without getting into too much detail about that particular property, if you want me to attempt. Can I do that?
As long as we're not talking about the applicant.
Yes. Nope.
Okay.
So design capacity for commercial industrial was 560, I want to make sure, 563 EDUs. And Sammy's numbers were for commercial accounts, and that was 74. So quite a bit of difference there. And that was the 2018 projection. That was the 563. The 2028 was 748.
Okay,
So
thank
the-
you.
Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yes, thank you, Ryan.
Okay. And if those, like I said, if those numbers change, you guys are you'll know it, but I don't know if they're gonna change all that much.
So I had a question. It was about the BODs, and you said at a certain point, it's bad for the fish or the environment. What is that BOD level that triggers concern?
So we're on a permit limit that's seasonal. So our permit limit, and I want to make sure I get you the accurate data, Counselor. So let me pull out my permit, and I can give you those numbers. The reason why it's not off the top of my head is because we actually never come close to it.
That's
So
good.
yeah, so between May and October, we have a BOD limit of 10. So we're what is called a 1015 or 1030 permit. So I'm sorry, did I say 1015?
Yes.
1030. So from November to April, our limit is actually 30. So we have never had anything above 5. I think 5 milligrams per liter is the highest we've ever seen. And so that's half of our limit. And that was a one-time deal. Most of the time we are at a non-detect for BOD and a non-detect for ammonia. Ammonia is the other constituent that could play a factor in this loading. The reason why I haven't brought up ammonia is because Charles and I have not really honed in on the ammonia and what that's going to look like as far as capacity on loading. But just by using the BOD, I can almost guarantee that ammonia will never be an issue either.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Ryan, it's Paul again.
Counselor Alexander.
Oh,
and then
go
we'll have
ahead.
Paul. Counselor Alexander?
Yeah, I'm just curious what's done with as far as BODs, how do you get rid of that?
It's the process that we have. So it's biology, the aeration basin. We are almost to the point that we can do some small tours once we get through COVID-19. The reason why we haven't had a counselor tour or staff tour is because of obviously of restrictions. But once you come out there, we can run through how the process works. But it's biology. Yep.
Okay.
And Paul Thompson.
Brian, sorry, more questions.
No worries.
This stems from the fact I used to do work for MWMC back in the 90s. So you've mentioned flow, you've mentioned BOD. I'm assuming suspended solids is not an issue at the plant?
No. And the reason why, Paul, is all of the solid state. Yeah. Yep.
The two-step system.
Yep.
Just making sure. Okay, thanks.
Yep. You bet.
Any other questions for Brian?
Does everybody understand that last question from Paul? Well, what Paul was asking about was suspended solids, and the way our collection system works with the step system, the solids stay on site. So suspended solids is never really an issue, which actually helps the biology at the plant and the life of the membranes. So when there's low loading, I think right now our mixed liquor, which is basically the bugs. We're running that at around 6,000 milligrams per liter. We've ran the plant up to 14,000 milligrams per liter just to kick the tires and see how far we could push with solids. And we found that that's probably way too far up the line. So we brought that number back down. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
One last call for any questions for Brian. Okay, we're going to bring Damien on to talk about water. Hi, Damien.
Hi, everybody. Brian, thank you. That was
yes,
very good job and informative. And also thank you for giving me the easy part, water. I don't have any diagrams, and there's probably fewer need for very many questions because the water system was identified years ago to be nearing capacity already. So after that was determined, the city put together a master plan and eventually pursued grants and loans to upgrade the water system, which we are knee-deep in doing right now. So rather than discuss capacity, since we're already nearing that for various measures, especially fire flow needs, I'm just going to give you a quick update on where the water system's at as far as the upgrades for the water project. Excuse me. So currently there is one major project under construction. It's the long-awaited crossing of I-5 to serve already annexed properties and to be available for future properties to be annexed on that side of the freeway that are currently within the UGB, but not territory yet. That will provide the most difficult link and a connection between the existing system and those properties over there. As I mentioned, it's under construction right now, and during the next few weeks, the bore will be in various stages of completion. Additionally, for additional source, which provides more capacity to pump out of the ground and feed storage, and also redundancy for sources, the city has, I believe, is either just about to or maybe Ann could clarify that in a minute, but roughly this week going into final contract on a piece of property for a well field. We've conducted 2 test well drills and various capacity testing, and now chemical testing, water quality that is. And it's a favorable location that should get the city the volume and the quality of water that's needed. If it's unknown already or to anybody, that's on Stallings Lane. So that will give more water coming out of the ground. We have the link going across the freeway that will not only serve those to be annexed properties and already annexed properties over there, but that line will also go up the hill to feed the next project, which is elevated storage, another reservoir for the city in the Diamond Ridge subdivision. So the completion of those 3 projects and a few miscellaneous, much smaller projects over the next 1 to 2 years will basically give the city water capacity and service needs for the next roughly 10 to 20 years, and then some. It just depends how fast the build out is completed as far as residential and commercial industrial lands. So as I said, I kind of got the easy part. There's not a whole lot to analyze at this point. That work was done many years ago, and we're getting very close to having a system of water that's as usable and meeting the city's needs as the much newer wastewater treatment plant. So I think I can answer any questions anyone might have about the, I guess, the current projects or all there is to really discuss.
Damien, how big is the bore under I-5? What size pipe are we looking for?
We are putting in a 24-inch casing carrier pipe that will carry a 12-inch water line.
Thank you. So I think it was Councillor Alexander. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so we still have to do a little bit testing on the Stallings property, you said, for chemical, right?
No, that's actually been completed.
So with all the farms and everything out there, the water turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah, we got the deeper you go on wells around here, just because of various strata layers, typically it gets better in the Coburg region at least. And what we found with nitrate levels that were tested, I believe it was every 20 feet down to 160 feet where we stopped. The nitrate levels were actually better than the city's current wells, which was very nice to hear.
What's the most shallow point that you checked, you said?
Brian, do you recall that?
Yeah,
I wanna say
40.
50.
40?
Yep.
So I'm wondering how long it takes chemicals to get to certain levels.
I would say it really depends on, that could actually change in very short distances based on clay layers and other things like that.
Is that a rock level down there, or is that all dirt, all soil?
Excuse me, I didn't hear the first part.
Do you go through a rock layer, or is that all soil?
We went through a clay layer that, well, it starts out clay and then, I'm sorry, well, there's various layers, but when we hit the rock layer, that's where the real water production started. And that's what we were actually looking for. And it's underneath layers that are more protected by more clayey type materials.
That's all I've got.
Any
How
other
deep-
question?
I do.
Councillor Fox.
How deep would, sorry, what would be the minimum depth that we would draw water from?
We are planning to draw from around 150 feet. We stopped advancing at 160 feet on this well. We're getting plenty of capacity from that layer, so there's really no need to go any deeper. Often when you get too deep, you run into other interesting things such as ancient seabeds, and water becomes more saline and things like that. So there's really no advantage of going any deeper on this well.
And the other part of the question is, you said rock, is the water soft like most of the water in the area, or is it harder?
The water is going to be, it's going to resemble your existing water, which off the top of my head, I can't remember how hard or soft it is. Brian probably knows the exact number.
I don't have a current
okay.
data point. The only hardness sample that we've done recently, I want to say it was 8. So it was pretty low.
Fairly, from my recollection, the water is fairly soft for well water, but harder than what you would see from river water intake. But again, it's not going to be a significant or noticeable change from your current water supply, especially after mixing. The two supplies will eventually be mixed, and probably no notice.
Do we have any other questions? Ann?
Mayor, I just wanted to say that, of according to our agreement to purchase the property, we had a due diligence date of October 31st. to Make sure that the water that we needed, the quality and the amount of water was there. And so as soon as I get home tomorrow, I'll start working on closing that property, and we can close it pretty quickly. So it'll probably close in this first week in November.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, any other questions for Damien? I'd like to go back. Are there any questions about the annexation process for Henry or Ann Davies that anybody might have after thinking about it for a bit? Just sponges, we've absorbed it all. Any questions in general about any of this that anybody has? Otherwise, we're pretty much done.
I wondered if any of our regional partners have any comments that they'd like to share. Sarah, or maybe not, but just making sure that they have
Patrick's coming
a
on.
chance if they'd like to share something.
Sure, Ann and Mr. Mayor, Coburg officials, good evening. I just appreciate the information. I mean, it's really nice to get information in advance of applications, or, in this case, just, try to educate everybody, including myself, on how annexations fit into the development code and the comprehensive plan. So, we're here for you, and I don't have any questions or additional comments, just appreciate the chance to get to know Coburg a little better.
Thank you, Patrick. I see Austin's coming on.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to echo just the thanks that Patrick mentioned, and also say my dog just snuck into the room, by the way. That's why the door just opened. Sorry about that. Freaked me out. I was like, why is the door open? Sorry. I just want to say, the work you're doing, this is going to be an asset for Coburg and really for the region that doesn't exist in many places in Oregon. So you are creating an incredible amount of leverage and influence to make sure that ultimately what this property is used for matches the needs of your community and the character of your community. So I just commend you all for being proactive about this and continuing to work on this. It's one I've talked about for a long time since I joined the county, and it's really exciting to see the city continue to move and progress on this. So thanks again for including us, and always happy to join and chat with anybody about this.
Thank you, Austin. Anybody else would like to say anything? There's Sarah Means. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So great to see everybody. First of all, thanks again for having your regional partners on the call. Coburg's very good about doing that, and I just want to extend thanks. Patrick on the Regional Solutions team is going to be your guy to, all things land use and annexation. So we're really fortunate to have Patrick as a resource in our region. So utilize him definitely. And just want you to know that, this definitely is on the Regional Solutions radar, and we're supportive of the work that you're doing. So anything that we can do to be a resource, we're happy to help. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to commend Ann, because Ann Heath has been in touch with all of these, and we've been pushing hard to really open communications and get those regional, statewide resources in on this, which obviously if we're communicating, that helps us if we have issues come up. So it feels really good to have all these resources here. And Ann has done a lot of legwork to make that happen. So thank you to Ann for making that happen and keeping the communication going. And I know as mayor, I intend to keep doing that. I've been in touch with Heather Buck and just really trying to keep them up on what we're doing. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? Well, it looks like we've done it. It's 6:52. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in and picking up on a little bit of information that we're going to need and use down the road. So if you have any questions, certainly when Ann gets back tomorrow, give her a day or two to get caught up. But You know that Ann's always available. So, and certainly I am too, if you have questions. So thanks again to everybody. I appreciate all of your input and the hard work. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.